Okay, hi everybody. Welcome again to another English class here on verbaling.com. My name is Lisa, and in this hour we're having a reading class. We have an article from the magazine Psychology Today, so it's somewhat of a academic kind of article. And if you want to read it with us and you want to learn some new words, some expressions, have an interesting time reading, come and join us. You just click on the Join Class button up there when you see it. Of course, if you have a reservation, then you can use it now because you always have the first 2 minutes of the hour to use the reservation. If you don't use it, then it just goes away and then everybody can join at any time. You can join a verbaling class at any time, so it's nice if you can come in the beginning and you get the whole hour, but if you can't, you can join us, and also if you have to leave early, that's okay too. Okay, so hi guys, welcome back, come in.
Thank you.
All right, and Hamada. Hamada, how are you? Or Hamada?
I'm fine.
Sure.
How are you doing?
I'm doing well. How do you say your name?
Hamada.
Hamada. Okay, Hamada.
It's Hamada. Yes, it's Arabic name. Yes.
Okay, Hamada. Well, welcome to class. Welcome. Good to have you. I put the link to the document up in the verbaling chat there.
It needs permission.
Oh, I need to open it up. Okay, let me open it and give you guys permission to open it so everybody can see it. All right, now it should be good. Yes, people are there.
Okay.
Okay, and hi Anatoly, welcome to class.
Hello, thank you.
Hi, and Mateo, you're back for some more. All right. And we're going to learn about women and men in this one.
A big difference.
Yeah. For sure. Okay, good. All right, you guys. Well, like I said, this is a reading class, and in my reading classes, I choose articles about different topics from different websites. I choose articles that are authentic English, so they're not, especially for English classes or anything like that. They're just articles from websites that people go to. It's pretty higher level usually for my reading classes, so intermediate to advanced. Just depends. Everybody can work at their own level. I go over the vocabulary and stuff so people can understand, but you may not understand everything you read, but if you get the main idea, that's good enough for now. And the more you read, the more you build your vocabulary. And also, one of the things is there are lots of different ways you can read. Sometimes you can read just for pure content, just education, interest, learning something. But if you really want to narrow in on the language, then when you're reading, it's a good way to look, how is this sentence structured. You could pay attention to the verbs, you could pay attention to the prepositions, maybe you want to pay attention to the adjectives, so how they're describing things. Lots of different ways you can work with an article, a piece of writing. Of course, it has to be interesting, so hopefully it's interesting to people. That helps always. But also, it's just good for language, too. Okay, let's see. Verbaling chat's not working for Amparo. Hi, Amparo. So we can use the group chat. I put the link to the document there for you. No problem. Hi, guys. Let's see. More people came in. Fernando, hi there. Welcome.
Hi, teacher. Thank you.
Hi, and let's see, Tomas. Hi, Tomas.
Hello.
How are you?
I am fine, thank you.
Tomas, where are you calling from?
I am from Spain.
From Spain. Okay. What part of Spain?
Ciudad Real, center of Spain.
Oh, okay. Cool. All right. And Wilmer, how are you today?
Hi, teacher.
Hi, welcome. Okay, guys, we can go ahead and get started. It's kind of a longer article. It is from this, it's a magazine, but of course every magazine has a website now, so it's from Psychology Today, and it's a newer article, just came out last month, and it's called Is This Number Threatening You? Studies show that it's not sex or infidelity. It's something much more common. Okay, so the relationship killer just means, something that causes a relationship to die. That's the idea there. It kills the relationship. So a lot of people think that it could be sex. Maybe you don't agree on how much you have it or how it should be or something like that. Or infidelity, meaning one person had an affair, having sex with another person outside of the marriage, something like that. But in fact, she's saying it's something much more common than that even. All right, so we're going to get started. I will read out loud, and so you can hear how to pronounce the words and stuff, and then it'll be your turn to read out loud, and then we will also go over the vocabulary. Okay, research shows that it's mainly how couples fight, not what they fight about. Not what they fight about it. That best predicts. All right, should be there. That best predicts the ultimate success or failure of the relationship or marriage. But arguing about money appears to be the exception. Studies consistently show that conflict about financial issues is, as Jeffrey R. Dew and Robert Stewart note, stronger, longer lasting, and predicts divorce better than other types of marital conflict. Okay, Amparo, start with you.
Research shows that it's mainly how couples fight, not what they fight about, that best predicts the ultimate success or failure on the relationship or marriage. But arguing about money appears to be the exception. Studies consistently show that conflict about financial issues is, as Jeffrey R. Dew and Robert Stewart note, stronger, longer lasting, and predicts divorce better than other types of marital conflict.
Marital. Yeah, good. Okay, so getting into it here. So this Psychology Today is it's kind of a what do you call like a magazine for what we call lay people, so you don't have to be a professional therapist or counselor or something, but at the same time it is for educated people and people who want to understand not just opinions but also research. So the articles often talk about what the research says, kind of as the starting point for having the discussion. Okay, so that's why we say research shows. All right, it's usually how couples fight, how you talk to each other, not necessarily what you're fighting about, that best predicts. So to predict means to kind of like make an educated guess. So you make a prediction. Oh, I think in the future these people are either going to stay married or they're going to get divorced. That would be like a prediction. Related to the ultimate success or failure of a relationship. Ultimate means like the final, the end result. So ultimately, do people stay together? That would be a success. Or do they divorce? That would be a failure of that particular relationship or marriage, actually. Okay, but arguing about money appears to be the exception. So you have an exception to the rule. So we have what is common, and then we have an exception. So an exception is what the rules don't apply to the exception. So usually it's about how you're fighting, how you talk to each other, what you do in the fight. But money is an exception, meaning it is important what you're fighting about, which is financial issues. So the studies consistently show, consistently means over and over again, the research studies, they show the same thing, that a conflict is like the fight that you're having. If you're fighting about financial issues, money, not having enough money, paying the bills, that kind of thing, then that's a stronger, longer lasting problem, and it predicts divorce better than the other types of marital conflict, marital related to marriage. So if you fight about money a lot, that's a strong predictor, you could say, of a divorce. So it's not a good thing. As a child, I assumed that all married people, that is parents, fought about money. Mine did all the time, both in and out of earshot. The long and short of it was pretty simple. My mother thought my father didn't make enough of it, and my father thought she spent too much of it. The role money plays in a marriage is both literal, determining how well the family lives and how often or infrequently they have to worry about making ends meet or deny themselves things they deem necessary, and symbolic. On the symbolic side, there's who makes the money or most of it, how much power that gives him or her, and whether the main wage earner uses that power. Okay, Anatoly.
Mhm. As a child, I assumed that all married people, that is, parents, thought about money. Mine did, all the time, both in and out of earshot. The long and short of it was pretty simple. My mother thought my father didn't make enough of it, and my father thought she spent too much of it. The role money plays in a marriage is both literal, determining how well the family lives and how often of frequently they have to worry about making ends meet or deny themselves things they deem necessary, and symbolic. On the symbolic side, there is who makes the money or most of it, how much power that gives him or her, and whether the main wage earned uses that power.
Okay, good. So as a child, she assumed. So when you assume something, it means you just think. You don't really know. You don't really know the correct information or something like that, but you're just assuming that that's how it is. So it's your belief, okay? So she just thought that as a child, all people, all adults, which means parents, her parents, they fought about. So fought is the past tense of to fight. So they fought about money. She says mine did, my parents did, all the time. And here, this is an expression, in and out of earshot. So to be within earshot or to be in earshot means you can hear it. If you are out of earshot, it means you can't hear it. So she's expressing the idea that her parents fought a lot about money, sometimes when hear them fighting, and she knew sometimes when she couldn't even hear them fighting about it, they still were. Okay, the long and short of it. That just means like the basic idea. The long and short of it, you're going to tell somebody the main idea of what your story is. So the long and short of it was simply that her father didn't make enough. That's what her mother thought, and her father thought that the mom spent too much of the. So shopping, for example, buying things. So that's the whole story, right? And the short of it. All right, the role money plays. So what the important role is. How is money used in a marriage? That's the literal role. So depending on how much money you have in a marriage, in your family, that determines your lifestyle. So how well your family lives. And also how often or how infrequently, not often, you have to worry about making ends meet. So if you have a lot of money, you don't have to worry about how to make ends meet. But if you don't make enough money, then that's a common concern. Like, how are you going to pay the bills? So to make ends meet means you have these bills and you have an income, and they have to meet so that the bills get paid. That's what it means, to how to pay for everything. And it also, literally depends on if you have to deny yourself things. Like maybe you don't have enough money to buy something, so you eat rice or pasta all the time or something like that. So you might have to deny yourself, which means say no. You can't buy certain things because you don't have enough money. That's real literal. But then there's also the symbolic thing. And the symbolic idea is, who's making the money, who has the power, and whether or not the main wage earner. That's the person who makes the most money. The wage is how much money you bring in. If you use your power or not. So in traditionally, the man has been the main wage earner, and that comes with some power issues and symbolism. But now it's been changed, so probably even more so it's a problem in terms of fighting. Additionally, when one person makes all the money or the lion's share, that earner may feel resentful, put upon, or chafe at the unfairness of the situation. One man whose marriage of 20 plus years ended in divorce and who was the sole wage earner commented that he felt like a workhorse for everyone else's needs. He noted that when it came to spending, his needs came last, after his wife's and his children's. Okay, Fernando.
Okay. Additionally, when one person makes all the money or the lion's share, that earner may feel resentful, put upon, or chief at the unfairness of the situation. One man was married of 20 plus years and in divorce, and who was the sole wage earner, commented that he felt like a workhorse for everyone else's needs. He noted that when it came to spending, his needs came last, after his wife's and children's.
Good. Okay. So a person who makes all the money or the lion's share. So this is an expression. When we say the lion's share, it means most of. So maybe there might be one person that makes all the money, or there might be two people working, but one of them makes the most money, like most of the money. So one person might bring in, let's say, $3,000 a month, and the other person only brings in 500 or 1,000. So that's the lion's share. And this person, this earner, the person who is earning money, may feel resentful. When you feel resentful, you feel like, I did everything, you don't like it. You feel like you're not appreciated. Put upon, if you feel put upon, it means you feel like you're doing something that nobody appreciates you and you don't really want to do it. Or chafe, you feel kind of irritated, you don't feel, so all of these are negative feelings. And so you feel like it's an unfair situation. It's not fair that I have to be working all the time, making all the money, that kind of thing. And here's an example. So this person, his marriage ended in divorce. That's a way to say that they got divorced. So his marriage ended in divorce. He had been the sole, meaning the only wage earner. So he made all the money, and so he commented, he said that he felt like a workhorse. A workhorse means he's the hard-working person. Everybody else's needs were being met, but not his own. So his needs came last. So everybody else, his wife and his children, their needs were being met, and he was working all the time. So he didn't feel good about that. He was feeling resentful. That's the idea. Similarly, a woman who earns all the money and is in what she considers a very good marriage, allowed as how 100% of the couple's fights were about money, and that she felt resentful that she was the rainmaker. It remains, even after all this time, a bone of contention. Money is used symbolically to mollify people and to control them. It can function as a substitute for love, and spending can be a stand-in for other unfulfilled needs. There are checkbook husbands and fathers, wives, and mothers. Okay, Hamid.
Similarly, a woman who earns all the money and is in what she considers a very good marriage, allowed as how 100% of the couple's fights were about money, and that she felt resentful that she was the rainmaker. It remains, even after all this time, a bone of contention. Money is used symbolically to modify people and to control them. It can function as a substitute for love, and spending can be a stand-in for other unfulfilled needs. There are checkbook husbands and fathers, wives and mothers.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Okay, so similarly, so whether or not it's the man or the woman. So similarly is referring to, here was a man, but then there's also, it happens to women too. So if a woman is earning all the money, and she might be in what she considers a very good marriage, like she thinks everything's okay, but she notices that the fights are still all about money, and so she feels resentful that she was the rainmaker. The rainmaker is the person that makes things happen. Okay, so she's bringing in the money, and there's a quote here. It remains even after all this time a bone of contention. That's an expression. A bone of contention means the thing you fight about, the thing you don't agree with somebody else about. So if a couple fights about the same thing all the time, that's the bone of contention. So that the fact that she's working and making all the money, the husband doesn't like it, for example. So the bone of contention is that she brings in all the money. So symbolically, it can use to mollify people, so to appease them, to make them calm down, I'll give you some money, calm down, let's go out to dinner, I'll buy you dinner, something like that. Or to control them. So we know about that, controlling people with money. It can also function as, so to work as or to serve as, a substitute for love. So in a relationship, sometimes, maybe they started off in a loving relationship, and then the money, now in terms of doing things, instead of doing things that show love, you just spend money. So it can be a stand-in for other unfulfilled needs. So a stand-in is like a substitute. So instead of maybe having dinner with somebody, you just write a check. That's the idea here. So this sentence says there are checkbook husbands, fathers, wives, and mothers. A check, it means, instead of spending time with your child, maybe you just say, oh, here's some money, go buy yourself a pizza, something like that. So you use the money to show people that you love them, but it's not really a very loving thing. It's just using the money to substitute for other things that could show that you love that person. And everybody does it, husbands and fathers, wives and mothers. Money is both public and secret at once. How much or little money we have determines where and how we live and shapes the social circles we travel in. How we spend money and whether we care about it and value it are part of our public persona. Most of us are brought up to keep the financial details of our lives private. Even those who flaunt the trappings of wealth keep the true details under wraps. From the outside, you can't tell if that mansion is paid for or heavily mortgaged, or if that spiffy car is owned or leased. Okay. Mateo. Wait, Hamid, is it your turn? Or Mateo's? Okay, Mateo.
Mateo's turn.
Sorry.
Okay. For money.
Yeah.
Okay.
Money is both, yeah.
Money is both public and secret at once. How much or little money we have determines where and how we live, and shapes the social circle we travel in. How we spend money and whether we care about it and value it are part of our public persona. Most of us are brought up to keep the financial details of our lives private. Even those who flaunt the trappings of wealth keep the true details under wraps. From the outside, you can't tell if that mansion is paid for or heavily mortgaged, or if that spiffy car is owned or leased.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so this whole paragraph is about the secrecy of it, So it's both public, people might know how much you have, but at the same time it's a secret because you don't really know how much people have. So, but it does determine, depending on how much money you have, it determines, that means it makes a difference. Can you buy this house or do you have to live in this house? So it determines where you live, how you live. It also shapes the social circles we travel in. Shapes mean, usually rich people and poor people don't travel in, we say, the same social circles. So you have different friends. So it depends on who you spend your time with, how much money you have. Also, how we spend our money, whether we care about it and value it, are part of our public persona. So people, look at you and they kind of see, do you spend money a lot? Do you save your money? Do you buy expensive things? That people look at you, that's called your public persona, your kind of your reputation, how people see you. Most of us are brought up. Brought up means we are raised. So our parents bring us up, they raise us, and they teach us to keep the financial details private. So usually, in most cultures, I think, people don't really talk about private details of how much money you have, where, how do you spend your money, that kind of stuff. Even those who flaunt. To flaunt means to show off. So people who flaunt the trappings of wealth, the trappings meaning the things that you buy with your money, they try to keep these things, the true details of them, under wraps. So the expression is to keep something under wraps. It just means to keep it private, to keep it secret. So you don't go around telling everybody about your assets, the things that you own. From the outside, which means looking at you, looking at your lifestyle, we don't really know your money situation. A mansion is a very large house, so if we know you live in a big mansion, we don't know is it paid for, that means you don't owe any money, or is it heavily mortgaged? Maybe you owe $1 million to the bank still on your house, something like that. Same with the car. You have a spiffy car. Spiffy means like a nice car. Is it owned? Did you pay for it already, or are you just leasing it, which means you're going to have to return it after a year or 3 years or something. So we don't really know. Just because you drive nice cars or live in fancy houses, we don't know what your financial situation is really like.
Yeah, before I told the car, do you remember?
Okay, in truth, in a culture which believes in romantic love, few couples embarking on marriage actually explore their attitudes toward money, saving, spending, debt, or investment. It appears most people feel that talking about dollars and cents seems crass or unsexy when you're pledging your undying love, even though that omission may provide the fuel for the undoing of your connection to each other. One 30-something woman who just ended her marriage of 3 years remarked ruefully that not talking about finances beforehand was the single biggest mistake she had made. Okay. Thomas.
In truth, in a culture which believes in romantic love, few couples embarking on marriage actually explore their attitude toward money, saving, spending, debt, or investment. It appears most people feel that talking about dollars and cents seems crass or unsexy, where you really your ending love, even though that omission may provide the fuel for the undoing of your connection to each other. One 30-something woman who just ended her marriage of 3 years remarked ruefully that not talking about finance beforehand was the single biggest mistake she'd made.
Good. Okay, so in a culture, we're talking about American culture here, we believe in romantic love. So the idea that you get married because you love each other, that's the idea, even though that's what we believe. So we don't have arranged marriages, for example. That would be the difference. Few couples embarking on marriage. So to embark on something means to begin. So you're beginning your marriage. You're just starting out. being married, it doesn't happen very often that they explore their attitudes toward. So you have an attitude towards something. So what do you think about money, about saving money? How do you spend it? What do you think about debt? Do you want to have debt or investments? A lot of couples do not talk about that when they're first getting married. It appears most people, they have a problem talking about dollars and cents. So that's just talking about money. It seems crass. Crass is like harsh, or it's just a kind of a not a fun subject to talk about. It's unsexy. You don't want to talk about that. It's boring. It's not a fun topic. So you don't want to talk about things like that to the people the person you're pledging your undying love to. To pledge means when you make a commitment, when you promise, that type of thing. Undying means like forever. You're going to love this person forever. You don't want to talk about dollars and cents. You want it to be more romantic. That's the idea here. Talking about money is not romantic. That's the idea. So even though the omission means when you don't include something. So if you omit, that's the verb to omit something, you leave it out. So even though like not talking about this may provide the fuel for, that might be the fuel gives the energy, right? Like the car needs fuel to go. This might be the fuel that is fuels the undoing of your connection. So that means the divorce. So down the road, in a while, in a few years, if you don't talk about this, it could be the thing that leads to the divorce. That's the idea. The undoing of your connection. So this lady, she remarked ruefully, which means remarked means she just said, she said, and she was sorrowful. She was sad. They were married for 3 years, and she believed that this was the biggest mistake, the single biggest mistake that they made was to not talk about the finances beforehand, before getting married, before doing something. So she says, in hindsight, we absolutely should have discussed our attitudes towards spending, but even more toward paying bills and accruing debt. I know now that my ex is always in arrears, always in debt, always short of his obligation, and it made me nuts. And I didn't want to play the taskmaster or mommy, garnishing his paycheck and doling out an allowance, but that's the only way it would have worked. Another woman, now celebrating 35 years together, said, if we'd talked about money at the beginning, we would have saved ourselves a lot of trouble and turmoil. We bullied our way through it, but our attitudes toward money couldn't be more different. We're the ant and the grasshopper from the fable come to life. Okay. Right, Wilmer.
With the one tree or in hindsight? Okay.
In hindsight.
Let's say in hindsight, we absolutely should have discussed our attitudes toward spending, but even more toward paying bills and accruing debt. I know that my ex is always in errands, always in debt, always short of his obligation, and it made me nuts. And I didn't want to play to Dexter or Mommy, garnishing his paycheck and doling out of an allowance. But that's the only way it would have worked. Another woman now celebrating 35 years together said, if we had talked about money at the beginning, we would have saved ourselves a lot of trouble and turmoil. We built
Bullied.
or bullied our way through it, but our attitudes toward money couldn't be more different. We are the ant and the ghost shopper from the fable come to live.
To life. Come to
To
life.
life. To life.
Good. Okay, so this lady who got divorced, she says in hindsight. So whenever you say in hindsight, it means you're saying, well, when I'm looking at it now, but you're talking about something that happened in the past. So when I can see it from now and I'm looking back into the past, she can see how important it was. She says we absolutely, absolutely, totally, definitely should have discussed, talked about their attitudes towards spending. But even more, she says, toward all these other things too, like paying bills and accruing debt. So to accrue means to get or to gather debt. So when you accrue debt, it means like each month you have more and more debt. So now what she knows is that her ex, means her ex-husband, he's always in arrears. That means behind. So behind on paying his bills. He doesn't pay them on time. He's always in debt, which means he always owes somebody some money. He's always short of his obligation. He doesn't pay enough, so whenever he's supposed to do something, he is short. He doesn't do it fully. And this made me nuts, she says. So it drove her crazy or drove her nuts. And she just couldn't stand it. She didn't like it. And she didn't want to play the taskmaster or mommy. So she didn't want to, when you're a taskmaster, it's like you're telling the person, do this, do that, do this, do that. So she didn't like to play that. And, mommies sometimes are like that with their children, right? So they don't usually like to be that with their husbands. She didn't want to do this thing, which is garnishing his paycheck. So to garnish somebody's paycheck or garnish the wages means you take their money before they pay the bills and you take the money to pay the bills themselves. So she didn't really want to do that. She didn't want to take his money from his paycheck and then dole out. Dole out means to give. Give him an allowance, a certain amount of money, and that's the only way it would have worked. So she didn't like the idea of how he dealt with money. This other lady said the same thing, even though they're still together. She says we would have saved ourselves a lot of trouble and turmoil. So to save yourself trouble and turmoil means, we could have done this differently so that we didn't have so much trouble, so many fights, that kind of thing. Turmoil is when you're fighting a lot and you don't feel good. And she says we bullied our way through it, which means they argued with each other, they fought with each other. I'm right, you're wrong, this type of thing. And because their attitudes toward money couldn't be more different. So she and her husband didn't really agree. And she says it's like the fable, a story, come to life. They're the two characters in this story, the different characters, and it's in real life that they live this fable. Other couples cobble together solutions to keep the din down and the fighting to a minimum. Separate checking and saving accounts, appointing a single bill payer, and agreeing to joint discussions of purchases over a certain dollar amount. These solutions sometimes work and sometimes don't. The complex role finances play in marriage led researchers Jeffrey P. Dew and Robert Stewart to examine whether financial conflict was really about dollars and cents or a relationship issue under another guise. They examined the extent to which conflicts about finances were driven by economic pressures, measures of communication, respect, or fairness, or affected by commitment to the marriage and spouse. Their results amply demonstrated precisely how complicated these arguments are and how they are not always what they seem. Okay, Amparo.
Other couples cobbled together solutions to keep the din down on the fighting to a minimum. Separate checking and saving accounts, appointing a single bill payer, and agreeing to joint discussions of purchases over a certain dollar amount. These solutions sometimes work and sometimes don't. The complex role finances played in marriage led researchers Jeffrey P. Dew and Robert Stewart to examine whether financial conflict was really about dollars and cents or a relationship issue under another guise. They examined the extent to which conflicts about finances were driven by economic pressures, measures of communication, respect, or fairness, or affected by commitment to the marriage and spouse. Their results amply demonstrated precisely how complicated these arguments are, and how they are not always what they seem.
Mhm. Okay, good. All right, so couples cobble together solutions. When you cobble together something, it's like you put it together, but not in a very good way. You just like piece it together the best that you can. So it's like trying to fix something, but you have to use whatever you can. You just kind of piece it together, and they do that to keep the din down. The din is the noise. So they're just trying to keep the noise down, and the fighting to a minimum. So trying to avoid fighting so much. So these are some things that people do. They have separate checking and savings account. One person pays the bills. They might have joint discussions. That means both of you, the wife and the husband, have to agree about purchases, things that you buy that are over a certain amount of money. And sometimes these, and she puts them in quote, like solutions. Sometimes they work, sometimes they don't. So these guys decided they would research and figure out, what's happening. What is this complex role that finances play in a marriage? They also wanted to examine, to study whether or not the conflicts were really about money or perhaps something else, another relationship issue under another guise. So to be under a guise means like in a costume, or like you're hidden, so you're really, the fight is about money, but underneath there's really something more important that's not being discussed. That's the idea in a relationship. Are you really fighting about the thing you're fighting about, or is there some underlying issue that's not being dealt with that's really the cause? So that's what they did. They examined the extent to which, so kind of the extent is how much, how much are these conflicts really about finances? Were they driven by economic pressures, meaning like we don't have enough money, we have pressures to pay the bills, we need to buy a new car, we don't have enough money, something like that? Are those the real reasons they were having conflict? Or what about issues of communication, respect, fairness, affected by commitment to? Maybe you're fighting really because one person wants to get out of the marriage, or doesn't feel the same about the other person, something like that. So their results of the research amply demonstrated. Amply means significantly. If something is ample, it's a lot. Okay, a huge amount. So it amply demonstrated precisely, so like exactly how complicated, how these are not easy issues. They're very complicated arguments, and they're not always what they seem. So they found that you're not always arguing about the thing you think you're arguing about. It could be some underlying issue going on. Okay, not surprisingly, economic pressure, okay, remember that could be like not having enough money to do something, predicted conflict for both husbands and wives, but consumer debt was a lightning rod for husbands, not wives. This is interesting since in the sample, husbands earned 76% of the income. Was it the increased pressure to earn to repay debt they responded to, or were they reacting to spouses overspending? On the positive side, the more committed wives and husbands were to their spouses, the less likely they were to fight about money. Okay, Anatoly.
Mhm. Not surprisingly, economic pressure uh, predicted conflict for both husbands and wives, but consumer debts was a lightning rod for husbands, not wives. This is interesting since in the sample husbands earned 76% of the income. Was it the increased pressure to earn to repay debt that responded to? Or were they reacting to spouses overspending? On the positive side, the more committed wives and husbands were to their spouses, the less likely they were to fight about money.
Mm-hmm. Not surprisingly. So it's no surprise that, of course, people were fighting because of economic pressures, not having enough money to pay the bills, that type of thing. But this was something that was interesting. Consumer debt. That means, just buying things, using a credit card, for example, and not being able to pay it off every month, so you have a debt. Just to buy consumer things like clothing, makeup, shoes, TVs, electronics, that kind of stuff. This was a lightning rod for the husbands. Lightning rod means a big issue here. So it was very important to the husbands about the consumer debt, but the wives, it wasn't a big deal. So this is interesting. The husbands were earning the majority of the income. And so what was the real problem? Were they upset? Was it frustrating for the husbands because they had to earn more to repay the debt? Is that why they were upset? Or they didn't this was just their reaction to their spouses overspending. So did they think their wives were spending too much money? So we don't really know what it was. On the positive side, if the people were committed, so if they loved each other, they wanted to stay married, that kind of stuff, then they were less likely to fight about money. So that was on the positive side. That opens the door to wondering whether people fight about money as a way of avoiding bigger issues like lack of commitment. Similarly, the more respected by a partner a spouse felt, the less conflict about finances. This held true as well for those who felt the dynamics of the relationship were fair. In their conclusion, the researchers wrote, thus, financial conflicts may serve as proxies for hidden relationship problems. All right, I'm going to just cut it there so we have more to read. Okay, Fernando.
That that opens the door to wondering whether people fight about money as a way of avoiding bigger issues like lack of commitment. Similarly, the more respect by a partner spouse felt, the less conflict about finances. This held true as well for those who feel the dynamics of the relationship were fair. In their conclusion, the researchers wrote, those financial conflicts might serve as a proxies for hidden relationship problems.
Okay. All right, so that opens the door to wondering. So when you say it opens the door to, it means this allows us to think, to wonder, are we really talking about money, or perhaps are they avoiding, trying to not talk about the bigger issues such as, or like, a lack of commitment. So lack of commitment here means, each spouse doesn't feel committed to each other or one or the other, something like that. If the partners respected each other, they had less conflict about finances. And if they thought the dynamics means like the situation, the energy in the relationship, if it's fair, they also didn't fight so much about money. So they concluded, in their conclusion, that yes, that financial conflicts may serve as proxies. Proxies is a stand-in. So there's something else really going on. There's some kind of hidden relationship problem, but we're going to talk about money instead. So that's what they found. Some couples may simply not be consciously aware of the issues that underlie their financial conflicts. Alternatively, fighting about finances may be easier, more socially acceptable, or safer for a relationship than fighting about deeply rooted relationship issues. The takeaway, if you are fighting about money, you should ask yourself. All right, there's all these things. Okay, Hamid.
Some couples may simply not be consciously aware of the issues that underlie their financial conflicts. Alternatively, fighting about finances may be easier, more socially acceptable, or safer for a relationship than fighting about deeply rooted relationship issues. The takeaway: if you are fighting about money, you should ask yourself.
Okay, so maybe people aren't even aware, consciously aware, means you don't even realize what you're doing. You're fighting about money, but really there might be some underlying issues. This is the verb here, to underlie. So kind of like what's underneath, what's really going on underneath these conflicts. And it's interesting because alternatively, another idea is that possibly these people are fighting about finances because it's easier. It's easier than talking about maybe a more tricky situation or complicated issue. It might be more socially acceptable. Like it's okay to talk about money, but not okay to talk about if you no longer love your partner or something like that, or you want to, do something different. It might be safer for the relationship, and then you don't have to deal with deeply rooted issues. So deeply rooted things that are really at the root, at the heart of the issue, at the relationship that could maybe end it or something like that. So the takeaway, whenever you read something, you have the takeaway. What is it that you get from reading this article or this research paper or something like that? So the takeaway, if you're fighting about money, you need to ask yourself some questions to make sure what you're fighting about is really the money. Is the issue really about money, financial pressures, spending beyond your means, or something else? Are you reacting to the symbolic aspects of your spouse's financial behaviors, inferring a lack of commitment or respect or fairness? If so, are you addressing those underlying concerns? If you are really fighting about money and spending, stay on topic and remember that communicating both your sense of commitment and willingness to resolve things cooperatively will go a long way. Okay, Mateo.
Okay. Is the issue?
Exactly, yes.
Okay. Is the issue really about money, financial pressures, spending beyond your means, or something else? Are you reacting to the symbolic aspects of your spouse's financial behaviors, inferring a lack of commitment, of respect, or fairness? If so, are you addressing those underlying concerns? If you are really fighting about money and spending, stay on topic and remember that communicating both your sense of commitment and willingness to resolve things cooperatively will go a long way.
Will go a long way. Okay, so financial pressures, those are the same thing, like not having enough money, the pressure of, how to pay the bills. Spending beyond your means. Your means is your income. How much money do you have? And are you spending more money than you actually have? Symbolic aspects. Are you really inferring, like when you fight, are you inferring means, are you really trying to say that maybe there's some kind of lack of commitment, maybe there's a respect issue, fairness, it's not fair, that kind of thing. What are those underlying concerns or issues that you have? And if you're going to fight about money, stay on topic. That means you don't bring up anything else, you don't talk about anything else, you just keep talking about the money issue. And to remember to tell the other person about your commitment and your willingness. How willing are you? Do you really want to resolve things cooperatively, together, not like fighting and one person wins, one person loses? So if you do that, it will go a long way. That means it'll go a long way to help the situation. So you don't have to worry about fighting about these other things, how committed are you to each other, that kind of thing. Another study by Dew, Sonia Britt, and Sandra Houston yielded even more insight into the dynamic of conflicts fueled by finances. These disagreements were the only type of conflict reported to predict divorce by husbands. Wives concurred but added sex as well. Even more interesting, when the researchers controlled for economic pressures, they found that regardless of financial capabilities, this conflict remained a high predictor of divorce at all levels of the levels of the socioeconomic continuum, so like on a scale. That's pretty astonishing and suggests that how little or how much money the couple has may not matter nearly as much as the conflict itself. Okay, Wilma. Read that right there.
Okay, another study by Dew, Sonia Britt, and Sandra Houston yield even more insight into the dynamic of conflict fueled by finances. These disagreements were the only type of conflict report to predict divorce by husbands. Wives concurred, but add sex as well. Even more interesting when the research controlled for economic pressures. They found that regardless of financial capabilities, this conflict remained a high predictor of divorce at all the levels of the socioeconomic continuum. That's pretty astonishing and suggests that now little or how much money the couple has might not matter nearly as much as the conflict itself.
Mm-hmm. All right, so we're running out of time, so it's really important that it's definitely a predictor of divorce, but husbands say, but also wives concurred. It means they agreed, but they also added sex as well, so that's another issue for women. But it didn't matter how much money you had. Even wealthy people, poor people, if they're having conflict over money, it still predicts the potential divorce after time. So it's still important to consider. So just having a lot of money doesn't necessarily mean everything's okay. People still fight about money even when they have it. So I'm going to just finish reading quickly here because we're running out of time, and then we'll be done. Their findings also suggest that the really destructive communicative patterns in conflicts, what John Gottman has called the 4 horsemen of the apocalypse, are specifically linked to financial disagreements. These patterns include criticism, attributing personal characteristics to the problem, not a person's actions, contempt, criticizing in an insulting and abusive manner, defensiveness, denying responsibility, making excuses, hurling criticism back at the speaker, and stonewalling. Demand, withdrawal pattern. So if you're fighting about money, the chances are very good that the right answer isn't "it's only money after all." Recognize financial conflict as the heavy-duty symbolic dynamite it is, as well as its destructive potential. Pay attention and deal with it consciously and constructively if you want your relationship to thrive and survive. If you don't, do nothing. This kind of fighting will do the heavy lifting for you, which means you'll probably end up getting divorced. Okay, guys, well, now you know. Pay attention to those financial concerns in relationships. Thanks for coming to class, guys. We ran out of time, so we don't have time to talk about it, but hopefully it was interesting to you guys. Thanks.
Thank you,
Thank
teacher.
you very much.
You're welcome.
Thank you.
Bye, everybody.
Guys.